Caveat is a horrifying, deeply unsettling film, and not just because it's Irish. Damien McCarthy's 2020 psychological horror stands, in my view, as one of the most distinctive and effective entries in the horror genre to emerge in recent decades. The film follows Isaac, a man recently discharged from hospital after a traumatic brain injury that left him with amnesia.
Oh no!
Desperate for work, he accepts a job from his former landlord, Mo, to babysit his emotionally disturbed niece Olga in his late brother's isolated island home. Arriving at the island, the film wastes no time in revealing its first and most literal caveat. At Olga's apparent request, Isaac is required to wear a heavy, chained harness leashed to the basement of the house. This not only physically ties him to the space, but more noteworthy, prevents him from entering Olga's bedroom. Understandably confused by this strange request, Isaac is reassured by Mo, who explains that Olga suffers from an intense fear of being attacked in her sleep. Following this, antics ensue. Disturbing paintings, the feeling of being watched, and Olga revealing cryptic information that just adds to Isaac's unease. At this point, it would be easy to assume the film is just using already established horror components: the remote house, the creepy child, and a receding hairline. So how does Caveat subvert genre conventions, you must be asking? Well, hang on, we need a bit more context. Isaac begins exploring the house, while Olga remains largely withdrawn, communicating through brief, tense interactions, giving on that she knows more about Isaac than he does himself. The house itself is a large, decaying and isolated, filled with clutter, narrow corridors and dimly lit rooms. As Isaac slowly moves through the space, he encounters unsettling details, strange objects, locked doors and photographs that hint of troubled family history. His restricted mobility makes navigation difficult, increasing his vulnerability and unease. While searching through the house, Isaac discovers a newspaper with a section focusing on Olga's missing mother, raising the question about her whereabouts and condition. Isaac also notices signs that someone may be living or moving through the house without his knowledge. Noises can be heard, shadows appear in the darkness, and he cannot shake the feeling that he is being watched. Isaac's fragmented memories begin to surface in disjointed flashes, hinting at prior connections with this family that go far beyond what he initially believed. These memories are incomplete and unreliable, leaving Isaac uncertain about his own role in events surrounding the house. One particular disturbing discovery is a small, drum-playing rabbit hidden within the walls. The toy, unsettling in both appearance and sound, becomes a reoccurring symbol of the house's oppressive atmosphere and Olga's disturbed mental state. Eventually, Isaac discovers that Olga's mother was murdered, finding her decaying corpse hidden behind a wall in the basement. And evidence within the house suggests that Mo himself may have been involved. The corpse seems to watch him. Its disturbing appearance and prior clues to something moving around the house suggest that this thing isn't truly dead, or is under the control of something far more sinister. A deeply shaken Isaac contacts Mo in a state of near hysteria, convinced that Olga herself may have been responsible for her mother's death. Struggling to piece together what he had discovered, Isaac explains his fears over the phone, expecting alarm or denial. Instead, Mo responds with unsettling calm, reassuring him that he will handle any involvement with the police, and that he will travel to the island himself to deal with the situation. His composed reaction implies the truth may be far more complicated than Isaac realizes. As Isaac waits, trapped in the house and increasingly unsure of his own memories, Olga's behaviour changes from distant and fearful to deliberate and threatening. In her fragmented perception of the past, she believes Isaac is now responsible for her father's murder, and she begins actively hunting him through the darkened corridors of the house. Confused, restrained, and physically limited by the chained vest, Isaac is forced into a desperate struggle for survival, no longer certain whether he is the victim of a misunderstanding or being punished for a crime he cannot remember committing. Mo's true intentions are gradually exposed to the audience. It becomes clear that he orchestrated Isaac's return to the island, not as a babysitting arrangement, but as a form of punishment. The harness and chains are revealed as tools of control, designed to trap Isaac within the house and force him to confront his past actions. Olga, rather than being merely a victim, becomes a key tool in this plan, her fear and behaviour shaped by the trauma of her mother and father's deaths. In a moment of desperate clarity, Isaac manages to free himself from the chained vest, turning the instrument of imprisonment against Olga by restraining her during one of her episodes. However, the reversal offers little relief. As Isaac begins to piece together the truth for himself, the house itself seems to turn against him. The oppressive sense of being watched intensifies, The boundaries between memory and the present reality blur beyond distinction. Apparitions of Olga's mother begin to appear at the edges of the frame, peering around corners, watching silently as Isaac desperately tries to escape the house. Each encounter brings her closer, escalating towards the harrowing climax which Isaac can no longer distinguish hallucination from reality. When Mo finally returns to the island, his true intentions are exposed. He confronts the now chained Olga in the basement, furious that she ruined his carefully constructed alibi. Already unstable and now fully distrustful of Mo, Olga responds by shooting him with her father's crossbow. She turns, leaving the grungy room, locking him inside. The film builds towards a bleak conclusion in which Isaac now somewhat understands his involvement in the murder and the reason for his entrapment. His amnesia, once a source of confusion, is revealed as a temporary refuge from guilt rather than a means of innocence. Mo's manipulations indirectly forces Isaac to reveal and acknowledge his actions, though this revelation offers no redemption. Caveat ends without providing clear comfort or closure. Isaac remains on the island, freeing the tied-up dog that was seen earlier, a clear sign that he's freed himself from the past, physically and psychologically, accepting the consequences of his past. The island house stands as a momentum to unresolved trauma, and the film closes on the note of lingering dread, leaving the audience to reflect on the memory, culpability, and the impossibility of escape from buried guilt. At first glance, Caveat appears to lean comfortably into the well-worn horror conventions. Its setting is isolated, its premise is implausibly dangerous, and its characters are steeped in unease and mystery. However, McCarthy does not rely on these elements to generate cheap shocks or predictable narrative turns. Instead, the film weaponizes restriction, physical, spatial, and psychological, as its primary source of dread. Isaac's enforced immobility is not merely a crude plot device, but a fundamental reworking of audiences' expectations. Horror protagonists are typically granted some degree of agency, even if only the illusion of it. In Caveat, this agency is stripped away almost immediately. The chain vest transforms the house into a trap rather than a setting, and the suspense emerges not from what might enter the space, but from what Isaac cannot reach. This sense of limitation is reinforced through McCarthy's use of mise-en-scène, the primary way I believe this film distinguishes itself. There is much representation within this film, things that are not direct but subtly placed within shots to give insightful views, something to keep the audience thinking. One particular bit of imagery that I personally latched onto was the tied-up dog. Initially, this can seem like an unnecessary afterthought, as the creature only shows up in 2 scenes of the film, so I'm going to overanalyze this one scene. The dog is not a dog.
What?
The dog, on a literal level, is just a dog, but it functions within Caveat, extends far beyond that of a background animal. It operates as a visual and thematic reflection of Isaac himself. Like a good dog, Isaac is timid, hesitant, and painfully non-confrontational. His struggle to assert himself, combined with his damaged memory and a limited understanding of the situations he's in, renders him passive and vulnerable, much like a frightened animal. This parallel becomes clearer in Isaac's relationship with Mo. Despite every instinct warning him that something is wrong, Isaac continues to follow Mo's instructions, placing trust in a figure who repeatedly demonstrates control and manipulation. The dog's obedience mirrors this dynamic. Both Isaac and the animal submit not out of loyalty, but out of dependence. Neither is afforded true agency within the space they inhabit. Ultimately, both Isaac and the dog exist within the same state of entrapment. This mirroring reinforces the film's broader themes of power, guilt, and manipulation. When Isaac frees the poor creature at the end of the film, it's a representation of him accepting his actions and letting go, letting himself free of guilt and paranoia. He's not an innocent man within this tragedy, but he accepts his own part in it, and when Olga finally confronts him, he does not run, rather giving her a solemn but accepting look. Another visual detail McCarthy appears to include, deliberately for the audience, is Isaac's clothing, an element often overlooked by casual viewers, but one that trained film audiences are conditioned to read meaning from. At the beginning of the film, Isaac is dressed in muted, drab, grey, washed-out tones. These colours lack distinction and energy, causing him to almost dissolve into the visual palette of the house itself. His clothing renders him indistinguishable from the environment, reinforcing his passivity, emotional numbness, and his fractured sense of identity. Visually, Isaac is not yet a presence in the space, he's simply another object existing within it. This changes after Isaac frees himself from the chain vest. In one of the film's most striking visual shifts, he finds and wears an old red coat. The coat is far from pristine, dulled by dust, age, and decay, but within the grey-brown monotony of the house, it immediately stands out. The The sudden introduction of a colour marks a transformation. Isaac becomes visually visible for the first time, suggesting an internal shift towards psychological awareness. He is no longer blending into the background, he is now marked. However, this red does not function purely as a symbol of empowerment. The coat's worn and faded condition complicates its meaning, aligning it with the film's bleak and emotional landscape. While it signifies growth and self-recognition, it simultaneously represents the weight Isaac carries. Red, particularly within Irish culture and cinematic context, is often associated with blood, violence and death. In this sense, the coat becomes a visual reminder of Isaac's buried guilt and his complicity in murder. The coat, therefore, operates as a dual symbol. It signals Isaac's emergence from psychological obscurity while also branding him with the consequences of his past actions. As he moves through the house wearing it, he becomes both more alive and culpable. Through this subtle but effective use of costume, McCarthy once again relies on visual storytelling rather than exposition, allowing colour and texture to carry emotional and narrative weight without a single line of dialogue. Where Caveat most sharply diverges from genre expectations is its refusal to explain itself fully. McCarthy resists the temptation to rationalise every threat or clarify every motivation. In this way, Caveat transforms familiar horror conventions into something far more disquieting. The film does not seek to reinvent the genre through spectacle or excess, much like more mainstream horrors, but through restraint. By denying both its protagonist and its audience comfort of knowledge, movement or control, Caveat creates a form of horror that lingers, not only because of what it shows, but because of what it withholds.